So I recently ran 3 games at an online con called Crit. And one of those games went really well. One of them went pretty poorly. And the third one was just kind of average. So I want to talk about the game that went poorly, where a player actually ended up dropping out mid-session. And the game that I think went pretty well, because I think that there are things to learn from our mistakes. And a lot of times those don't get talked about as much online because they're not as flashy of headlines. But let's talk about this game where I had a player drop out. So first off, it's an online con, which is important to note because they're a different beast, right? Like, you're playing with people that you may have never met. There's different audio qualities and things like that. A lot of people don't even have their cameras on. So we're playing 7 Delving Sins, which is a game that I wrote, and I'm kind of in my head about it in at least the first 2 games. I'm wondering, like, will people enjoy this? Will this totally fall apart? Do I have all the rules in my head? Am I going to run it right? That sort of thing. And I also ran 3 different adventures, which let me just recommend to you, if you're going to run a con, just run one adventure 3 times or whatever. Get really good at that one adventure, especially if they're ones that you wrote yourself. So that was mistake number 1. Mistake number 2, and I also want to say, like, I've run thousands of hours of role-playing games to this point. I've been playing for over 10 years, and I still make mistakes every game. So if you're out there and you're watching all these YouTube videos and stuff, these dungeon tubers, just know that they're making mistakes too, and just release that from yourself, that burden from your shoulders. So anyway, one of the main mistakes I made, mistake number 1, was that I've been so comfortable with my home game players that I forgot I was at a con. I have some great players, like really just truly kick-ass players. They're good at, passing the baton, sharing the spotlight, as it were, supporting each other, things like that. And when you're playing with a group of random people that you don't really know online, you can't make those sorts of assumptions about the people in your online game, which I did. We had that middle game I was talking about that went poorly. We had 3 players initially, and 2 of them were more passive and one was more dominant. And the dominant player started to really take the wheel of the party a lot. And there was a lot of role play that was still happening, so I kind of just got caught up in it. If I'm being quite honest, I totally got immersed in the role play because I wanted to run a fun, immersive experience for these people trying my game. And I totally took my hand off the wheel and let this dominant player basically run things for a while. And I just kind of forgot what was happening. I got lost in the adventure, and before I knew it, about an hour and a half into a 3-hour game, I got a message from the player saying, like, hey, I don't think I'm having fun here. This seems more like a solo adventure. I'm out. And he was right. I'm not even mad about the fact that he dropped out. I might have done the same thing, honestly. Like, if I was just sitting back watching some other player play, then I'd be a little bit annoyed too. Like, all right, game master, when are we going to start taking actions in turns and having, equal time at the table? So that was my cardinal sin, was that I didn't really structure the game. A lot of times, my home game, we're playing Shadow Dark, and we do a lot of, like, always on initiative. Every now and then, it's more freeform, popcorn style. But again, I said, my players are very good at sharing that spotlight. So I should have been doing something similar. I should have been facilitating a game where everybody is... It's ironic that I'm talking about this right after releasing a video where I talk about my player limit, because there were only 3 players in that game, and the game that went the best had 5 players. So that's just something to note here. So player drops out. There's this kind of awkward moment where the other 2 players are like, and we took a 5-minute break. It was a good time for a bathroom break anyway, halfway through the game. And the other player, I tried to message him, and say like, hey, sorry about that. That's on me. We're going to try to go in, turn-based order from here on. And it was already too little too late at that point for him. So no harm, no foul. He dropped out. But I say this all to say, like, it's important that I made an assumption about the game that was happening. I assumed everybody was having an equal amount of fun at the table. And that wasn't true. I had a player who was getting talked over. And I was missing the cues somewhat because, the camera went off. But that should have been a cue to me as well. Anyway, point being here that, like, something as small, seemingly as small as always on initiative or like taking turns in scenes could be something that makes or breaks a game that was otherwise, a good time. So that's a lesson I learned a hard way during this con. And from then on out, well, I only had one more game after that, but I decided, let's go to the Shadow Dark sort of always on initiative, because it really never fails. It gets bogged down a little bit more and things move a little slower sometimes, but you don't have those players fall through the cracks. You don't have your quieter players just totally check out. And you don't have dominant players completely grab the wheel and take over the ride. I don't know where my analogy is going here. But, so those were my two big mistakes, were making assumptions about what was happening at the table, what I thought was fun, and not making sure that everybody was having an equal amount of time to talk, make actions, interact with things. So there's your mistake to learn from, or here's my mistake that you can learn from. And then the second game, or the last game that I ran, was a ton of fun. We had a blast. We stayed in at always on initiative. I had 5 players. I was a little bit nervous about that one because it was an online game with 5 players, and also I've never run 7 Delving Sins for 5 people. It's designed as like a solo co-op. It can be played normally, but the way that the very narrative powerful abilities, or I should say each class has a very powerful ability, I thought maybe this is going to be too easy, too much of a cakewalk. Players are going to be bored, stuff like that. Turned out not to be that way. And in fact, I think part of it was a mentality shift too. I'd been working so hard on those first 2 adventures and trying to make this perfect adventure, whatever. I wanted to create a con experience that thought people would walk away from and think oh, I'd play that again. That was really fun. And so I realized I was being too rigid in that. So I decided to loosen up with the third game. And I've been sitting there, and I'm going to talk about sort of a second subject here. I've been rereading one of my favorite, this is probably my favorite comic series of all time. It's called Prophet. And I was feeling so inspired by this, but I was like, I'm kind of running a fantasy game. This is sort of sci-fi, sci-fantasy, if you will. And maybe it doesn't quite fit, but then I thought, what the heck? Play what you enjoy, run what you like. Whatever's inspiring you should be the thing that you're bringing to the table. If you have a fun idea that you think will work in a role-playing game, insert it. So, all that to say, I scrapped the third adventure I was going to run entirely, and I kind of just jotted down some ideas, and I drew a map, and I threw it out in front of the players, and I said, okay, this is going to be a little bit weird and different, but they bought into it. I mean, hook, line, and sinker. They got it. I don't know what it was, but there was, I guess because I released some of that onus on myself to make this perfect little game in this con, that third game was so much more fun and exciting, and I was enjoying it. And I think because of that, the energy was different between me and the players. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the energy you bring to the table as a game master is going to affect everyone else at your table. And so that third game was a riot, like end to end. It was still, you know, I structured it in a way that I thought like, we'll have like a beginning, middle, and end, and there's lots of things to interact with and toys to tinker with, stuff like that. It was still, you know, an old schoolish inspired adventure through the medium of, you know, a comic that I'd really been enjoying. But that game ended up being fun, and like literally everybody, I don't think, usually I can tell when people are just saying like, oh, that was a lot of fun, that was a really good time, thanks for running, man, all right, I'm out. Everyone had something to say afterwards. They had something to share. They thought either the system was really fun, they were like, I was not expecting like a sci fantasy adventure, that was so cool, I really liked where that went. There were big moments that everybody had, probably because, you know, we stayed in that initiative order, so everyone had some moment in the spotlight where like something crazy happened. But yeah, I feel like I learned a lot from running 3 on different adventures online. It's specifically adventures I wrote. Here's just some bullet points and a map. And that was the most fun one out of all of them. So, you know, I feel like you can over prep or like overthink it very easily. I still do it. I did it for 2 of my 3 games. So I don't know if there's a moral to that or like a point. You know, these are my ramble talks. They're just thoughts, decompressing after games that either go well or don't, or just, you know, thoughts during the middle of running games. But I think I'm going to try to take a much looser approach to cons going forward. Not try to like hit all the beats and make sure all these little things happen, but just have fun, because I feel like the point I'm trying to make here is that the more fun I had running reflected in the players. So I don't know, there's some food for thought, I guess. All right, I guess that's it. This is just kind of a debrief after Crit. So check out Crit next year. You know, there were some really cool games going on, a lot of index card RPG that I wanted to get in on, some Tales from Elsewhere that looked cool. Yeah, if you haven't, I'm also going to point to a video, I guess. If you haven't seen this video where I talked to Peter about adventure design, it's a little more, highbrow than these videos, but I had a lot of fun chatting with Peter about it, and then like rubber hitting the road running games at a con. So all right, that's it. I'm gonna keep smoking my pipe and enjoying the river today. So thank you guys for joining me. As always, a jack of all trades, master of none is oftentimes better than a master of one. Peace.